prosecuting Lori Vallow Daybell. We're expecting the status hearing to not last too long. They're going to set a trial date for him. He still faces the death penalty, doesn't have a trial date just yet. His case was continued because he didn't waive speedy trial, and there was some outstanding discovery issues, particularly about DNA. So hopefully we'll hear some more about that when that hearing comes up later this afternoon. It's going to be around 5:30, 5:45 Eastern when that happens, guys.
All right, Janie Lacy, thank you so much for being with us. And let's just ask real quickly, Michael, as you're listening to this testimony, Melanie not testifying, the other witnesses, what are your thoughts about this trial right now?
Well, I think they're certainly rounding things out at this point. We've heard tons of testimony, a lot of evidence that I think certainly can support a conviction on the conspiracy. I think it's a little more tenuous with the actual murders, but again, it doesn't really matter in this case. You face the same exact penalties, whether you're convicted of the actual murder or the conspiracy. But I think they're on solid ground, at least with the conspiracy.
And I think that every day, the more testimony they present that we get to listen to the next day on our audio, and Janie and Ted are telling us, I think the state is continuing to chip away and maybe get that jury to murder. We're going to have to wait and see, but that's my thought.
The other quick thing before we bring in our guest is, I'm still not clear, generally by this time in a trial, you have a sense based on cross-examination, et cetera, where the defense is going or where they consider the strengths of their case. And I'm not sure I have that yet.
Well, you know that we've talked about this in opening. They said alibi defense. She wasn't there. What else are they going to argue? We don't know yet. I agree. It's not enough.
It's not enough for a conspiracy
What are they going to
charge.
present? I agree with you.
Yeah, all right. All right, let's welcome in our guest now. Joining us, psychotherapist Dr. Janie Lacy is with us. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate it. Love having you on the show. And I guess where I want to begin is really trying to dig into the mind of someone like a Lori Vallow Daybell. Because as I was thinking about this case, and quite literally this morning, I'm saying to myself, you know, she's smiling in court all the time. And there is a sense, and we talked about this, that I think she's a real true believer in all this. And I want to ask you this question, and I hope no one's offended, but is there any correlation between believing such things as zombies and spiritual, the need to get rid of spirits out of people with mental health or mental health issues?
It can be, but not always the case, Michael. Sometimes we're looking at people that just fall into cults, toxic faith, and a lot of the things that will come out of that usually will come from a power and control that's fed to them, and then there's a belief system. But we also see those that have mental health issues, that have delusions, that have a lot of other things that play into factor that can also have toxic faith. So it's not necessarily one or the other, but we can see them be interchanged depending on the situation.
All right, so let me follow up with that and say, if the religious aspect wins the day, so to speak, and the jury says, okay, that's why she was doing this, is it possible, in your opinion as a psychotherapist, that Dr. Lacy, the jury could say, but she was a victim. She was a victim at the hands of Chad Daybell. He was the leader of this. He indoctrinated her. Don't make fun of me not being able to say words, Michael. Sorry, I tripped over that word. But that it's all his doing. And she, too, is a victim, and therefore, she shouldn't be held responsible.
Well, in my opinion, if I was evaluating someone like her, I would be looking at history. I would be looking at relational dynamics. I would be looking at her independence. I would be looking at their interchange. So one piece of it would not tell the whole story. We would have to look at the entire story, the history, the patterns, the problems, and seeing where she herself had some independence, or perhaps where she had some power and control that we can completely measure, and looking at all of these factors. And then we would be able to tell where the here and now would be and how those things would be affected when we are looking back at her history as well as their history. So it's not as black and white. We would have to look at that complete picture to be able to tell the story.
Dr. Lacy, we heard testimony yesterday where she was seen, or at least there was testimony that she threatened a friend of hers. And it was a very clear threat. Threatened her a couple of times. Threatened her with very specific things like, I am going to kill you, I am going to put you in a plastic bag, I am going to bury you. We also know that one of the victims in this case was found exactly like that.
Yep.
Is that some sort of slip by her to suggest, because we're trying to figure out if there's a way to get to the murder charge for her, specifically on JJ, which I think she had the motive and opportunity for JJ particularly. When someone speaks that way, is there any correlation at all to the fact that they could actually commit the act that they're talking about?
When we look at those that actually commit murders and we look at their history, right, we can see that there has been some level of intensity when it comes to anger and it comes to rage. But on the same page, Michael, people that will express things and metaphors doesn't necessarily mean that they're murderers, but most people don't speak in that language when they're expressing, whether it's anger or disappointment to a friend, those types of things. Those are not normal conversations that we would put in that spectrum of normal expression of disappointment or anger. But if we're looking back at those that have actually committed murder, and we're looking back, there's usually been some type of intensity around anger, around rage, and around threats that would be somewhere in the history, more than likely.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, what we've seen, Judge, is not her acts, but the acts of the people around her. I mean, how many people have died surrounding this woman to suggest the fact that, you know, somehow she's connected to those is not really that far-fetched of a theory.
And that's the theory. If I were the prosecution, that's what I would argue in closing. If you have all these spokes on the wheel, who's at the center? Lori Vallow Daybell is at the center of all of these. I agree with you. And the other thing I want to ask you about is her demeanor in the courtroom, because Michael and I have talked about this, and the laughing and the smiling, and Michael has suggested that she may be at peace with what she's done. She may have this religious belief and feel like she's done God's will and she's at peace. Maybe it's a nervous laughter, but is there any way, let's say the jury is watching her behavior, is there any way that a jury can really decide what her behavior means, in your opinion, or is it another thing that you have to look at that in context with all the evidence and everything else that's being presented?
In and of itself, what I would say, in my opinion, is that when we're looking at the behavior in a vacuum, so to speak, it would tell me that there's potentially some type of detachment to what's actually being placed on the table. But when we're looking at the history, right, we would want to see what's been the normal way to cope with different types of circumstances that would put things in context. But normally that level of showing, whether it's excitement, whether it's a joy, would be fleeting for a person that truly felt some level of guilt or felt some level of remorse, felt some level of true empathy when they're feeling some of those feelings of what has happened, especially to some of these victims that were close to her. But in and of itself, right, we would want to really think about that as just being detached, but we would want to look at the totality of who she is as a person and how she's coped with other things, if this would be considered the norm for her as an individual.
Dr. Lacy, if you were one that was asked to evaluate Lori Vallow Daybell, what is the first thing you would look for, you would ask in terms of figuring out, did she do this or not?
Well, I would be spending a lot of time if I was asked to be with her, because when we look at forensic psychology in particular, we have to consider if there is faking, and that has to be on the table, especially when it comes to such heavy situations, so to speak. So we're going to be looking at her not only through our measurement tools, through interviewing, and that would be happening over time. We would be looking at a consistent pattern that she's presenting, because we also have to put certain things on the table in our field, and that's just the way it is.
Doctor, the other thing that I wanted to talk about that has me a little perplexed is, again, I'm of the mind that she is a true believer in this whatever it is that they were believing, that, and she told her son, we heard testimony, she said, you know, you'll understand at some point. I think she believes everyone will be together at some point. She might even believe that she did a good thing if she was in fact involved in the conspiracy to kill her children or those around her who she believed were zombies or possessed by some evil spirit. And so my question is there any connection between, and this might be a legal question, but I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from, the mens rea, this idea that I have the intent to kill you, or on the other side, I actually don't have the intent to kill you, but what I do is I have the intent to save you from this zombie or from this evil spirit. How do you reconcile those two thoughts?
Well, we know historically there are people that are in cults or toxic faith that they fall in delusional states. They actually believe the things that they're saying. They actually do believe that by murder or taking someone's life that they're saving them versus I have intent to completely harm you from this evil place. And it truly, truly, truly is in a delusional state when they're believing that they're saving their child or they're saving someone that they're essentially going to harm. Because in that state, when they're kind of compartmentalizing, there's this duality that they'll operate from, which they have to believe in order to commit the actual crime. And what we'll see a lot of times, especially when it comes to what I would consider toxic faith beliefs, that they fall in these delusional states to carry out such said act and believing that they're actually doing good.
And quickly, I only have a couple seconds left. So just to understand what you're saying, I completely understand about this delusional state. There's no relationship between that delusional state and, let's say, a claim of insanity, for instance.
No, when we think about insanity, right, we're looking at that person's complete state of mind. So we're looking over time, and if they have that ability to, because when we're looking at this particular case, from what I know, is that when there's this engagement of purposeful, being deceitful, that she was cooking, she was cleaning, she was taking her kids to school, all these other types of things. And then when we're looking at that insanity plea, so to speak, that would not be the case from that type of history and that type of patterns that I've been reported to.
All right, fair enough. Yes. All right, Doctor, stand by, because we have a lot more questions for you about another case that we're following. Still ahead, folks. It's a question the jury will have to answer in the stepmom murder trial.
Did the thought ever cross your mind that she could be faking it and just wanting to have you have the opinions you have?
Is Letitia Stout faking her personality disorder? We're going to break down the jury question to see if we know which way they may be leaning. That's next here on Court TV.
Tonight on Close.